The harsh fluorescent lights of my tiny apartment kitchen buzzed overhead, casting shadows across the nearly empty refrigerator. My fingers trembled slightly as I pushed aside a wilted head of lettuce and half-eaten container of yogurt. Nothing. The milk was gone, and Jamie would wake up hungry in less than an hour. I closed the door with a soft thud that seemed to echo my failure as a mother. "It's okay, buddy," I whispered, watching my 10-month-old son sleep peacefully in his second-hand crib, blissfully unaware of our circumstances. "Mommy will figure something out." The apartment was quiet, except for Jamie's soft breathing and the occasional drip from the leaky bathroom faucet I couldn't afford to fix. 3 months behind on rent, electricity threatening to be cut off next week, and now, no milk for my son. The weight of single motherhood crushed down on my shoulders with each passing day. I sank onto the edge of my bed, the springs creaking in protest, and stared at my phone. The cracked screen reflected my exhausted face, dark circles under my eyes, skin pale from too many sleepless nights. One contact remained that could solve this immediate problem, but the cost would be far greater than any carton of milk. Daniel Castellano. Even thinking his name sent a shiver down my spine. It had been nearly 2 years since I'd fled from his world of luxury, danger, and obsession. 2 years of looking over my shoulder, working minimum-wage jobs under the table, and moving whenever I felt too comfortable. 2 years of raising our son, alone. My thumb hovered over his name in my contacts. I'd kept this burner phone with only his number, for emergencies. I told myself it was for Jamie's sake, but perhaps some part of me never wanted to completely sever that connection. The thought made my stomach twist with self-loathing. Just this once, I told myself. Just for milk. My fingers moved almost without my permission. "Your son has no milk." The moment I hit send, panic flooded through me. What had I done? The text was impulsive, desperate. Daniel probably wouldn't even receive it. He might have changed his number, forgotten about me entirely, moved on to some other woman who caught his eye. I paced the small apartment, my heart hammering against my ribs. Jamie stirred in his sleep, and I froze, praying he wouldn't wake yet. The clock on the microwave read 6:17 a.m. The bodega on the corner wouldn't open until 7, and I had exactly 2:37 to my name until payday next Friday. The phone remained silent, of course. What did I expect? Daniel Castellano, head of one of the most feared crime families in the city, rushing to deliver milk for a baby he'd never met? A baby he didn't even know existed until 30 seconds ago. I laughed bitterly at my own desperation. Then my phone vibrated, nearly slipping from my trembling hands. Address? Just one word. Cold. Commanding. So typically Daniel. My breath caught in my throat as memories washed over me. His dark eyes watching my every move, his possessive hands claiming me, his whispered promises that I would never want for anything as long as I belonged to him. I hesitated. Giving him my address meant opening a door I had fought desperately to keep closed. But Jamie needed milk, and I was out of options. With shaking fingers, I typed my address and pressed send before I could change my mind. The response was immediate. "Stay there." I sank onto the edge of the tattered sofa, clutching my phone like a lifeline. What had I done? Daniel wasn't the type of man who would simply drop off milk and leave. He was the type who took what he wanted, who saw the world as his to command. And once, he had wanted me. Until I discovered the truth about who he was. Until I found the bloodied shirt in the laundry. Until I overheard the conversation about making an example of someone who had betrayed him. Until I realized that the man I thought I loved was capable of ordering deaths with the same casual ease as ordering dinner. I had run then, terrified, and 3 weeks pregnant. A detail I hadn't discovered until I was 2 states away, sleeping in cheap motels and working whatever jobs I could find that paid in cash. Now, I had invited the devil back into my life. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Jamie would wake soon, hungry and crying. I began to think Daniel wasn't coming after all, that perhaps he had only responded to torment me, to remind me of my dependence. I stood and moved to the window, pushing aside the thin curtain to peer down at the quiet street below. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows glided to a stop directly in front of my building. My heart lurched painfully. No ordinary car in this neighborhood looked like that. Polished to perfection, oozing wealth and power. A man in a dark suit stepped out from the driver's side, surveying the street with practiced efficiency before nodding toward the back seat, and then he emerged. Daniel Castellano looked exactly as I remembered, yet somehow more intimidating. His tailored charcoal suit emphasized broad shoulders and a lean frame. His dark hair was shorter now, the sides closely cropped while the top remained slightly longer, styled with precision. But it was his face that caught the breath in my throat. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw perpetually shadowed with stubble, and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He didn't look up at my window. He didn't need to. Daniel always seemed to know exactly where I was, as if he could sense me. He carried a large paper bag in one hand while the other adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, a habitual gesture I had once found endearing. Now it reminded me of how meticulously he controlled everything in his orbit. I stepped back from the window, heart pounding wildly. This was a mistake. I should grab Jamie and leave through the fire escape. But before I could move, a firm knock sounded at my door. Too late. I smoothed my oversized t-shirt and worn leggings, suddenly achingly aware of how I must look. Exhausted, unkempt. A far cry from the woman who had once shared his bed in silk lingerie. I took a deep breath and opened the door, leaving the chain latched. Daniel stood in the dimly lit hallway, his presence seeming to fill the entire space, his eyes locked with mine through the narrow opening. And for a moment, neither of us spoke. I saw something flash across his face. Surprise, perhaps, at how much I had changed. Or disappointment. Elena. My name on his lips still carried the slight accent that had once made my knees weak. Open the door. It wasn't a request. I just needed milk, I whispered, hating the tremor in my voice. You can leave it. Open the door, Elena. His voice remained quiet, but steel ran beneath the softness. Or I will open it myself. We both knew the flimsy chain wouldn't stop him. With resignation, I closed the door, unlatched the chain, and opened it fully. Daniel stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over the tiny apartment in one assessing glance. I saw it through his eyes, the water-stained ceiling, the second-hand furniture, the clothes drying on a rack in the corner. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You live here. Not a question. An accusation. Yes. I lifted my chin slightly, a small act of defiance. We live here. At the word we, his gaze sharpened. He set the paper bag on my small kitchen counter and turned toward the sleeping alcove where Jamie's crib stood partially visible. Don't, I said, stepping between him and my son. Our son. Please. Daniel went still, the way he always did when something challenged his control. I remembered that stillness. It preceded either calculated charm or cold fury, with nothing in between. You kept my son from me. His voice was dangerously soft. For how long, Elena? I swallowed hard. He's 10 months old. The calculation was immediate. I could almost see him counting backward, remembering when I had disappeared from his life. His eyes darkened further. 10 months. He repeated the words as if testing their weight. You've kept my son hidden for 10 months. I was protecting him, I said, the words rushing out before I could stop them. Daniel's laugh held no humor. From his father? From the life he deserves? He gestured around the apartment. Is this what you call protection? Poverty? Struggle? From your world, I countered, finding a thread of courage. From blood money and violence and... Enough. The single word cut through my protest like a blade. I want to see him. Not a request. Never a request with Daniel. Jamie chose that moment to stir. A soft whimper that quickly turned into full-fledged crying. My heart sank as I moved automatically toward the crib, lifting my son into my arms. His tiny face was scrunched in hunger, his cries growing more insistent. Shh, it's okay, I murmured, bouncing him gently. Mommy's here. I turned to face Daniel, cradling Jamie protectively against my chest. The expression on Daniel's face stole my breath away. Gone was the cold calculation, the controlled anger. In its place was something I had never seen before. Raw, unfiltered emotion. He stepped forward slowly, as if approaching something precious and fragile. For once, the powerful Daniel Castellano seemed uncertain. He has my eyes, he said quietly, his gaze never leaving Jamie's face. It was true. Jamie had inherited his father's deep brown eyes, so dark they sometimes appeared black. The same eyes that could freeze men in fear now looked with wonder at the child in my arms. His name? Daniel asked. James, I answered. Jamie. Daniel reached out a hand, hesitating just before touching Jamie's cheek. May I? The request, the first genuine request I'd heard from him, caught me off guard. I nodded stiffly, and Daniel gently touched our son's face with a tenderness I hadn't known he possessed. Jamie's cries softened as he regarded this stranger with curious eyes. Then his face crumpled again, hungry cries resuming with increased urgency. He needs to eat, I said, stepping back. You brought milk? Daniel seemed to snap out of his trance, turning to the paper bag he had set on the counter. Yes. He began unpacking its contents, and I stared in disbelief. Not just milk, but formula, baby food, diapers, wipes, and groceries. Bread, eggs, fruit, vegetables, meat, enough to fill my empty refrigerator and cabinets for weeks, Daniel. I only asked for milk, I said, feeling the familiar mix of gratitude and resentment his generosity had always provoked. His help came with strings attached. Always. My son will not go hungry, he stated flatly, opening the carton of milk and pouring some into a clean bottle I'd left on the drying rack. He tested the temperature on his wrist, a gesture so unexpectedly paternal it momentarily stunned me before offering it to me. I took the bottle and sat on the sofa, adjusting Jamie in my arms. He latched onto the bottle eagerly, his cries immediately ceasing. The silence that fell between Daniel and me was heavy with unspoken words. Daniel removed his suit jacket, draping it precisely over the back of my rickety kitchen chair, and rolled up the sleeves of his crisp white shirt. The movement revealed the familiar tattoo on his forearm, a stylized lion, the symbol of his family. He had told me once it represented protection and power. I knew now it represented something far darker. You should have told me, he said finally, his eyes fixed on Jamie. He is my blood. And what would you have done? I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Brought me back to your world? Made your son a target for your enemies? Raised him to follow in your footsteps? Daniel's expression hardened. I would have protected you both, the way you protected Marco Ravelli, I countered, naming the business associate whose execution I had overheard him ordering. Or Ana Delgado, the woman whose husband had betrayed the family, who had disappeared along with her children. The flash of surprise in his eyes confirmed what I had suspected. He had never known exactly what I'd heard that night, what had driven me to run. You don't understand what you heard, he said, his voice lowering. You never gave me a chance to explain. What's to explain, Daniel? I know who you are, what you do. I held Jamie closer, as if I could shield him from the truth of his father's world. Daniel's eyes narrowed. And yet, you contacted me today. The truth of his words stung. I had reached out, despite everything I knew. Despite my fear. I was desperate, I admitted quietly. And now? Daniel moved closer, standing over us. Are you still desperate, Elena? The question carried weight beyond the immediate circumstance, and we both knew it. I looked up at him, at the man I had once loved without reservation, the man I had fled from in terror. What happens now? I asked instead of answering. Daniel crouched before me, his eyes level with mine, one hand resting lightly on Jamie's tiny foot. The gesture was possessive, claiming. Now, he said, his voice soft but resolute. Everything changes. My son will not grow up in poverty. My son will not want for anything. His gaze captured mine, intense and unwavering. And you, Elena, you will never run from me again. A chill ran down my spine at Daniel's words. There was no threat in his tone, only certainty, as if he were stating an immutable fact of the universe. The sun rises in the east. Water is wet. Elena will never run from me again. Jamie finished his bottle, his eyelids drooping with contentment. I gently shifted him to my shoulder, patting his back until he released a tiny burp. Daniel watched every movement with fascination, his eyes never leaving our son. He looks healthy, he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. You've taken good care of him despite... He gestured vaguely at our surroundings. Despite living in poverty, I finished for him. Yes, I have. He's had all his checkups, all his vaccinations. I work double shifts to make sure he has what he needs. Double shifts where? Daniel's eyes narrowed. The diner on Westbrook and the convenience store on Maple, I answered, immediately regretting giving him this information. I alternate between morning and night shifts. And who watches my son while you work? Mrs. Patel from downstairs. She's a retired nurse. Daniel nodded, filing away this information with the same methodical precision he applied to everything. You won't be working there anymore. The casual command ignited a spark of anger. You don't get to walk in here after 10 months and start dictating my life, Daniel. His expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened. I'm not dictating your life, Elena. I'm securing my son's future. He stood, towering over me. Our son's future. Jamie had fallen asleep against my shoulder, his warm weight both comforting and terrifying in this moment. I rose carefully and carried him back to his crib, needing a moment away from Daniel's intense presence. As I laid Jamie down, I felt Daniel approach from behind, his cologne, expensive and familiar, enveloping me in memories I'd fought hard to suppress. He sleeps peacefully, Daniel observed, standing so close I could feel his breath on my neck. Most of the time, I whispered, not wanting to wake Jamie. Except when he's teething. I turned to find Daniel inches away, trapping me between his body and the crib. His proximity sent my pulse racing, fear and something else I refused to acknowledge. He reached up slowly, brushing a strand of hair from my face with a gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about him. You cut your hair, he said, his fingers lingering near my cheek. I had chopped off my long dark hair into a practical bob soon after leaving, one of many attempts to transform myself into someone he wouldn't recognize. It's easier to manage with a baby. His eyes traveled over my face, cataloging the changes, the shadows under my eyes, the tension in my jaw, the wariness that had become my default expression. You're thinner, he noted with disapproval. I stepped sideways, escaping his proximity. Food isn't cheap. Daniel's jaw tightened. You should have come to me. And what would that have cost me? I asked, moving toward the kitchen to put distance between us. Nothing is free with you, Daniel, he followed, watching as I began putting away the groceries he'd brought. Is that what you think? That I would have made demands in exchange for ensuring my own child was fed? Wouldn't you have? I challenged, turning to face him. You've always believed everything and everyone has a price. Something flickered in his eyes, perhaps hurt, quickly masked by anger. Not everything. Not you. I laughed bitterly. Right. I was just a possession, wasn't I? Something pretty to keep in your penthouse, to show off at your fancy restaurants and private clubs. Daniel moved with unexpected speed, his hands gripping the counter on either side of me, caging me in, his face inches from mine. He spoke in a low, controlled voice that was somehow more frightening than if he'd shouted. Is that what you think you were to me, a trophy? His eyes bored into mine. Do you think I let just anyone into my life, my home, my bed? Do you think I let just anyone see me vulnerable, see past the facade I maintain for the rest of the world? My heart hammered against my ribs. I had seen him vulnerable during those rare, unguarded moments when he would speak of his childhood, of losing his mother, of surviving his brutal father. Moments when the calculated mask would slip, revealing the man beneath the monster. I knew things about you, I whispered. Things that could have been dangerous for you. A mirthless smile curved his lips. Exactly. And yet I trusted you with those things. With me, his smile faded. Until you betrayed that trust. I ran to protect my child, I countered. Our child. You ran because you were afraid, not of what I would do to you. You know I would never harm you. His voice dropped lower. You were afraid of how much you wanted the life I offered, despite knowing what I am. The accusation hit too close to the truth. I had been afraid, not just of him, but of myself, of how easily I had adapted to his world of luxury and danger, of how I had ignored the whispered conversations and sudden silences when I entered rooms, of how I had accepted his vague explanations about business, without pressing for details I knew I wouldn't want to hear. I was afraid for my soul, I admitted. And for my baby's soul. Daniel stepped back slightly, studying me. And now? Are you still afraid? I looked into his eyes, those dark, unfathomable eyes that had once looked at me with desire. with possession, with something I had almost believed was love. Yes, I answered honestly. I'm terrified. Something like satisfaction flickered across his face. Daniel had always appreciated honesty, even when it wasn't what he wanted to hear. Good. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you alive. He glanced toward Jamie's crib, but it won't keep him fed and clothed and educated. I folded my arms across my chest. I've managed so far. Barely, Daniel countered. And at what cost? You're exhausted. You're malnourished. His gaze softened fractionally. You're killing yourself slowly, Elena. I had no response because he was right. Each day was a struggle to stay afloat, to make ends meet, to provide for Jamie while constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the day when Daniel's world would catch up to me, or when social services would decide I wasn't providing adequately for my son. I want to show you something, Daniel said abruptly, pulling out his phone. He scrolled through it briefly before holding it out to me. On the screen was a photo of a house. No, a small mansion, set behind a tasteful iron gate. The property was lush with gardens and tall trees providing privacy. What is this? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Your new home, Daniel replied. Secure, private, with a nursery that's already been prepared for Jamie. I looked up sharply. Already been prepared? How long have you known about him? Daniel's expression remained impassive. I didn't, until your text this morning. But I've had people looking for you since the day you disappeared. He took back the phone, sliding it into his pocket. The nursery was hope. The admission stunned me into silence. Daniel Castellano didn't hope. He calculated, controlled, commanded. The idea that he had prepared a room for a child he didn't know existed revealed a vulnerability I hadn't expected. I can't just leave, I protested weakly. My job, my lease. Already taken care of, he interrupted smoothly. Your landlord has been paid through the end of your lease. Your employers will receive notice of your resignation, with generous compensation for the inconvenience. Anger flared within me. You had no right. I had every right. Daniel cut in, his voice hardening. The moment you kept my son from me, you forfeited your right to make these decisions alone. His expression softened marginally as he glanced toward the sleeping Jamie. I'm not your enemy, Elena. I never was. Then what are you? I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. Daniel considered me for a long moment. I am Jamie's father. I am the man who has searched for you for nearly 2 years. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the small kitchen. And I am still the man who wakes reaching for you in the middle of the night. The confession hung in the air between us, intimate and dangerous. I forced myself to look away, to remember why I had run, why I had kept our son hidden. I need time to think, I said finally. This is all happening too fast. Time, Daniel repeated, as if considering the concept. How much time did you give me before disappearing? How much time did you spend considering how it would affect me to lose you without explanation, without closure? Guilt twisted in my stomach. I hadn't given him time. I had fled in the night while he was away on business, leaving nothing but an empty closet and returned key. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. That's not fair, I whispered. No, he agreed. It wasn't fair. He checked his watch. Platinum, I noticed. The same one I had given him for his birthday. I have a meeting I cannot miss. We'll continue this discussion this evening. The casual certainty that he would return, that our discussion would continue, sparked my defiance. I haven't agreed to anything, Daniel. He regarded me with a look that was almost pitying. You contacted me, Elena. You opened the door. He moved toward the apartment door, pausing with his hand on the knob. I'll have groceries delivered this afternoon. Make a list of anything Jamie needs. I don't want your charity, I said, hating how petulant it sounded even to my own ears. It's not charity, Daniel replied coolly. It's responsibility. My son will be provided for, whether you accept it graciously or not. With that, he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him with quiet finality. I rushed to the window, watching as he descended to the street below. His driver held the SUV door open, and Daniel slid inside without a backward glance. The vehicle pulled away smoothly, leaving only a faint cloud of exhaust in its wake. I sank onto the sofa, trembling with the aftermath of his presence. Daniel had always had this effect on me, leaving me shaken, disoriented, caught between wanting to run and wanting to follow. Now the stakes were infinitely higher. Now there was Jamie to consider. I moved to my son's crib, watching his peaceful sleep. He looked so innocent, so untouched by the complications of his parentage. Would Daniel's world taint him? Or would it protect him in ways I couldn't? The questions circled in my mind without answers. My phone chimed with a text message. Daniel, of course. Car will pick you up at 7. Be ready. Bring Jamie. Not a request. Never a request. I typed a response, deleted it, typed again. What could I say? That I wouldn't comply? We both knew that was a lie. Daniel would return, with or without my cooperation. And part of me, the part I had tried desperately to silence for 2 years, wanted to see him again, wanted to understand what his reappearance in our lives would mean. I left the message unanswered and moved to the tiny bathroom, studying my reflection in the cracked mirror. The woman who stared back bore little resemblance to the one who had once shared Daniel's life. My hair was shorter, my face thinner, my eyes harder. I had changed, necessarily and deliberately. But had Daniel changed? Could a man like him change? Or was I fooling myself, grasping at the memory of tender moments to justify considering a return to his world? I splashed cold water on my face and began mentally cataloging what Jamie would need for the evening. Diapers, wipes, extra clothes, his favorite stuffed elephant. The routine tasks helped calm my racing thoughts, grounding me in the immediate reality of motherhood, rather than the uncertain future looming before us. By the time Jamie woke from his nap, I had reached a decision. I would go tonight, would hear what Daniel had to say, not because he had commanded it, but because Jamie deserved more than I could give him alone, because running had nearly broken me, and I couldn't do it again. Because facing Daniel, facing our shared past and possible future, was the only way forward. Jamie gurgled happily as I lifted him from the crib, his tiny hands patting my cheeks in greeting. "Hey, little man," I whispered, kissing his forehead. "You met your daddy today." The words felt strange on my tongue, foreign and frightening and somehow right. Daniel was Jamie's father, a fact I had tried to ignore but could no longer deny. Whatever happened next, that truth would shape all our lives. I held Jamie close, inhaling his sweet baby scent. "We're going on an adventure tonight," I told him softly. "And Mommy's a little scared, but I promise I'll always protect you, no matter what. Even," I silently added, if that meant protecting him from his own father. Outside, the afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across the worn carpet. Time was slipping away, carrying us inexorably toward 7 o'clock, and whatever awaited us in Daniel's world. I could only hope I was strong enough to face it. At precisely 7 o'clock, a soft knock sounded at my door. Daniel was nothing if not punctual. I adjusted Jamie on my hip, his diaper bag slung over my shoulder, and opened the door to find not Daniel, but a woman I didn't recognize. She was tall and elegant in a charcoal pantsuit, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Her expression was professionally neutral, but I detected a flicker of curiosity in her eyes as she assessed me. "Ms. Reyes? I'm Sofia, Mr. Castellano's personal assistant." Her voice was crisp and efficient. "The car is waiting downstairs. Daniel isn't coming up?" I asked, surprised and slightly relieved. I had spent the afternoon mentally preparing myself for another confrontation. A small smile touched Sofia's lips. "Mr. Castellano is attending to final arrangements at the house. He asked me to escort you safely." Safely. The word hung in the air, a reminder of Daniel's world and its dangers. I nodded, tightening my hold on Jamie as I followed Sofia down the narrow hallway to the elevator. Jamie, alert and curious, stared at the stranger with wide eyes. "He's beautiful," Sofia remarked as we descended. "He has Mr. Castellano's eyes." "Yes," I agreed quietly. "He does." The elevator doors opened to reveal my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patel, waiting to get on. Her eyes widened at the sight of Sophia, then narrowed as they took in my packed diaper bag and Jamie dressed in his best outfit. "Elena?" she questioned, concern evident in her voice. "Everything okay?" "Yes, Mrs. Patel, just visiting a friend." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. This woman had cared for my son, had slipped extra food into my apartment when she thought I wasn't looking, had become the closest thing to family Jamie and I had. She didn't look convinced, but nodded slowly. "You call if you need anything, yes? Any time. I will," I promised, knowing I might never see her again. "Thank you. For everything." Sophia led us through the lobby and outside, where the same black SUV from this morning waited at the curb. The driver stepped out immediately, opening the rear door to reveal a car seat already installed, brand new, top of the line, probably worth more than a month of my rent. "Mr. Castellano had it installed this afternoon," Sophia explained, noting my surprise. Safety is his priority. I allowed the driver to take my diaper bag while I secured Jamie in the car seat, checking and double-checking the straps before sliding in beside him. Sophia took the seat opposite us, her posture perfect, her attention politely averted to give us the illusion of privacy. As the vehicle pulled away from the curb, I stared back at my apartment building. For all its flaws, the perpetually broken elevator, the water stains, the temperamental heating, it had been our sanctuary, our home. Now I was leaving it behind, venturing into the unknown at the command of a man I had once loved and fled. "How long have you worked for Daniel?" I asked Sophia, needing to break the silence that had settled over the car. 3 years, she replied. "I started shortly before you left." The careful pause told me she knew exactly who I was, who I had been to Daniel. I wondered what else she knew, if she had witnessed his reaction to my disappearance, if she had been part of the search efforts to find me. "You must know him well, then," I ventured. Sophia's expression remained neutral. "Mr. Castellano is a very private person." "That's not an answer." A hint of a smile curved her lips. "No, it's not." She held my gaze steadily, "but I know enough to understand that your return, and Jamie's existence, changes everything." The implication sent a chill through me. "Changes what exactly?" Sophia glanced at Jamie, who was contentedly chewing on the ear of his stuffed elephant. "Mr. Castellano has always been focused, disciplined. The past 2 years, however, his focus has had a particular direction." "Me," I supplied quietly. "You," she confirmed with a slight nod. "Finding you became something of an obsession." I swallowed hard, looking out the window as the city streets gave way to more affluent neighborhoods, houses growing larger, more spaced apart, gates more ornate. And now he's found me. "Yes," Sophia said simply. "He has." The rest of the drive passed in silence. I watched the landscape transform, each mile taking us further from my life of struggle and closer to Daniel's world of luxury and danger. Jamie eventually dozed off, lulled by the smooth motion of the expensive vehicle. After about 40 minutes, we turned onto a private road, lined with mature oak trees that formed a natural tunnel. At the end stood a wrought iron gate, which opened silently as we approached. Beyond it, the house from Daniel's photo rose from meticulously landscaped grounds, an elegant 3-story structure of stone and glass, imposing yet somehow welcoming. Security cameras tracked our approach, and I noticed discreet figures patrolling the perimeter. Daniel's security was always thorough, always invisible until needed. The SUV circled a fountain before stopping at the front entrance. Before the driver could exit, the massive wooden door opened, and Daniel emerged. He had changed from this morning's suit into dark trousers and a charcoal sweater that softened his usually formidable appearance. His eyes found mine through the car window, intense and unreadable. The driver opened my door, and I carefully unbuckled Jamie, who had awakened and was taking in his new surroundings with wide-eyed curiosity. As I stepped out with Jamie in my arms, Daniel approached, his movements measured, controlled, as always. "You came," he said quietly, the simple statement carrying layers of meaning. "Did you doubt I would?" I asked, adjusting Jamie on my hip. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. With you, Elena, I've learned to expect the unexpected. His gaze shifted to Jamie, softening visibly. He reached out, gently touching our son's cheek. Jamie, to my surprise, didn't shy away, but instead reached for Daniel's finger, grasping it firmly. Something flashed across Daniel's face. Wonder, perhaps, or possession. "Welcome home," he said, the words directed at Jamie but his eyes on me, challenging, questioning. I didn't correct him. This wasn't home. Not yet, maybe not ever. But arguing seemed pointless as he gestured for us to enter, his hand settling lightly at the small of my back, guiding me into the house that he had already decided would be ours. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. Soaring ceilings, warm wood floors, tasteful furnishings that blended luxury with comfort. Fresh flowers adorned side tables, their subtle fragrance perfuming the air. Everything spoke of wealth, but not the ostentatious display I had sometimes seen in his previous homes. This place felt different, more permanent, more personal. "Do you like it?" Daniel asked, watching me closely as I took in our surroundings. "It's beautiful," I admitted. "But it feels different from your other places. It was designed with different priorities in mind," he replied cryptically. Before I could ask what he meant, a middle-aged woman appeared from what I presumed was the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dishcloth. "Ah, Mrs. Alvarez," Daniel said. "This is Elena and Jamie." The woman smiled warmly. "Dinner is ready whenever you are, Mr. Castellano." Her eyes lingered on Jamie with approval. "And I've prepared something special for the little one." "Thank you," Daniel replied. "We'll eat shortly." Mrs. Alvarez nodded and retreated to the kitchen. Daniel turned to me, extending his arms toward Jamie. "May I?" The request, again, a genuine request, caught me off guard. I hesitated before carefully transferring Jamie to his father's arms, ready to take him back at the first sign of distress. But Jamie didn't cry. He stared up at Daniel with fascination, reaching a tiny hand toward his father's face. Daniel held him with surprising ease, supporting his head and body with practiced care. "You seem to know what you're doing," I observed. "I've been studying," Daniel replied, his eyes never leaving Jamie's face. "Books, videos, consultations with pediatricians." The image of Daniel Castellano, feared crime boss, ruthless negotiator, studying baby books and watching parenting videos was so incongruous I almost laughed. But the tenderness with which he held our son was undeniable. "Would you like to see the nursery?" he asked, glancing up at me. "It's upstairs." I nodded, following as Daniel carried Jamie up the sweeping staircase. The second floor opened onto a wide hallway with several doors leading off it. Daniel led us to one near the end, pushing it open to reveal a nursery that took my breath away. The room was spacious and bathed in soft light from recessed fixtures. A hand-carved wooden crib stood against one wall, draped with linens in soothing blues and grays. A comfortable rocking chair sat in one corner beside a bookshelf, already filled with children's books. Toys, tasteful, educational, age-appropriate, were arranged on low shelves. A changing table stocked with supplies stood ready, and a door led to what appeared to be a connected bathroom. "Daniel," I whispered, overwhelmed by the care and thought evident in every detail. "When did you do all this?" "I started it the day after you left," he admitted, surprising me. "Not specifically as a nursery, but as a child's room. I told myself it was for the future, for someday." He met my gaze, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. "I always intended to have a family with you, Elena." The confession stunned me into silence. In our time together, we had never discussed children, never talked about a future beyond the immediate. Or rather, I had never brought it up, assuming a man like Daniel wouldn't want the complication of a family. "You never said anything," I finally managed. "Neither did you." He shifted Jamie in his arms, the movement gentle but confident. "Would it have changed anything if you had known I wanted children with you?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I honestly didn't know. Would it have changed my decision to run if I had known Daniel saw a future for us beyond the dangerous present? Or would it have terrified me more? The idea of bringing a child deliberately into his world. Daniel seemed to read my thoughts. You don't have to answer that now. He crossed to the crib, laying Jamie down on his back. Jamie immediately rolled to his side, his preferred sleeping position, and Daniel raised an eyebrow at me. He always sleeps like that, I explained. On his side with his elephant. Daniel retrieved the stuffed elephant from where it had fallen to the floor and tucked it beside Jamie. Our son grabbed it immediately, his eyelids already drooping with the fatigue of an exciting day. He's tired, I said softly. It's been an overwhelming day for all of us. Daniel nodded, stepping back to allow me space next to the crib. I leaned over, stroking Jamie's hair, and singing the quiet lullaby that always soothed him to sleep. From the corner of my eye, I saw Daniel watching intently, memorizing this ritual, this moment of ordinary magic between mother and child. When Jamie's breathing deepened into sleep, I straightened, finding Daniel closer than I expected. His proximity sent a familiar rush of awareness through me, the subtle scent of his cologne, the warmth radiating from his body, the intensity of his gaze as it held mine. He's perfect, Daniel murmured, his voice lower than before, intimate in the quiet room. Yes, I agreed, stepping back slightly, needing distance from his magnetic pull. He is. Daniel gestured toward the door. We should let him sleep. The monitor is already activated. We'll hear if he wakes. I glanced at the state-of-the-art baby monitor on the nightstand, then back at my sleeping son. The idea of leaving him alone in this strange place, even with a monitor, triggered my protective instincts. He's safe here, Elena, Daniel said, reading my hesitation. This is the most secure property I own. No one enters without my knowledge. Reluctantly, I followed him from the room, leaving the door ajar. Daniel led me back downstairs to a formal dining room where the table was set for two, candles already lit, wine breathing in crystal decanters. You were very confident I would come, I observed, taking the seat he held out for me. Daniel took his own seat across from me, his eyes steady on mine, not confident. Hopeful. Again, that word, hope. So at odds with the calculating man I had known. Before I could respond, Mrs. Alvarez entered, serving a first course of some delicate soup that smelled divine. My stomach rumbled, reminding me I hadn't eaten properly in months, really. Please eat, Daniel encouraged, noting my hesitation. Mrs. Alvarez is an excellent cook. The soup was indeed delicious, and I found myself hungrier than I'd realized. We ate in silence for several minutes before Daniel spoke again. I want to discuss arrangements, he said, setting down his spoon. For you and Jamie. I tensed. Here it was. The negotiation, the terms, the price for his generosity. What kind of arrangements? Daniel reached for his wineglass, taking a deliberate sip before answering. I want you both to live here, permanently. Jamie needs stability, a proper home. And he needs both his parents. I set down my own spoon, appetite suddenly diminished. And if I don't agree? Daniel's expression hardened slightly. I've been patient, Elena. I've respected your space today, allowed you to come to terms with the situation, but make no mistake. My son will grow up with his father present in his life. Are you threatening to take him from me? My voice shook with sudden fear. No, Daniel replied firmly. I would never separate a child from his mother, especially not our son from you. His expression softened fractionally. But I am prepared to take legal action to establish my parental rights if necessary. The implied threat hung in the air between us. Daniel had resources I couldn't hope to match. Lawyers, influence, endless funds. If he sought custody, even partial custody, I would be powerless to stop him. So my choices are to live here, under your control, or fight a losing battle in court. I summarized bitterly. Your choices, Daniel countered, are to provide our son with the stability and security of both parents in a safe, comfortable home, or to continue struggling alone while I pursue my rights as his father through legal channels. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. I'm offering you a partnership, Elena, not imprisonment. A partnership on your terms, I argued, in your world. Would you prefer I moved into your apartment? He asked with a hint of sarcasm. Would that make you feel more in control? I flushed, knowing how ridiculous the suggestion was. Daniel Castellano in my tiny apartment, with its leaking faucets and temperamental heat, was an absurd image. What about your work? I asked instead. Your business. We both knew what I meant. The family business. The empire built on blood and fear. Daniel's expression grew guarded. My business interests are separate from this house, from our family. Are they? I challenged. Can they ever truly be separate? He was silent for a moment, considering. I've made changes since you left, he said finally. Legitimate investments, legal enterprises, the other aspects, are being addressed. I raised an eyebrow skeptically. You expect me to believe you're going legitimate? Just like that? Not just like that, he corrected. It's been a process. One that began before you left, before you heard that conversation and misunderstood what was happening. Misunderstood? I repeated incredulously. You ordered a man's execution. Daniel's expression remained impassive. I ordered a traitor's removal from our organization. Marco Ravelli was working with the FBI, wearing a wire to meetings, putting my entire family at risk. And Ana Delgado? Her children? I pressed. Did they pose a risk too? Ana Delgado and her children are living comfortably in Arizona under new identities, Daniel replied calmly. Her husband had made enemies outside our organization, who wouldn't have hesitated to use his family as leverage. I arranged their protection and relocation. I stared at him, trying to reconcile this information with what I had believed for 2 years. How can I possibly believe that? Daniel reached into his pocket and withdrew his phone. After a few taps, he slid it across the table to me. On the screen was a photo of Ana Delgado, looking healthy and content, her arms around 2 smiling children in front of a modest but pleasant-looking house. This was taken 3 months ago, Daniel said. She sends updates occasionally to let me know they're doing well. I pushed the phone back toward him, my mind reeling. Had I misunderstood? Had I fled based on assumptions that weren't accurate? Or was Daniel simply showing me what he wanted me to see, crafting a narrative to lure me back? Even if that's true, I said slowly, it doesn't change who you are, what you do. No, Daniel agreed, surprising me. It doesn't change who I am, but it might change your perception of what I do, and why. Before I could respond, the baby monitor on the table crackled with Jamie's familiar fussing sounds. I rose immediately. He's probably hungry again, I explained, already moving toward the stairs. He usually wakes once before settling for the night. Daniel stood as well. I'll come with you. Together we climbed the stairs, returning to the nursery where Jamie was indeed awake, his little face scrunched in displeasure. I lifted him from the crib, checking his diaper before reaching for the bottle I had prepared earlier. Allow me, Daniel said, holding out his hand for the bottle. When I hesitated, he added, please. Reluctantly, I handed him the bottle and watched as he settled into the rocking chair, adjusting Jamie in his arms with surprising competence. Jamie accepted the bottle eagerly, his eyes fixed on Daniel's face with innocent curiosity. You've been practicing, I observed quietly. Daniel glanced up, a rare, unguarded expression on his face. With dolls, it seemed important to learn. The image of Daniel Castellano practicing baby care with dolls was so unexpected, so at odds with his fearsome reputation, that I almost smiled. Almost. Why? I asked softly. Why go to all this trouble when you didn't even know Jamie existed? Daniel was quiet for a moment, watching our son drink. Because I knew, eventually, I would find you, he finally replied. And I hoped. When I did, we might have a chance to start again, to build something real. Something real, I echoed. Built on what foundation, Daniel? Trust. How can I trust you after everything I know? How much do you really know, Elena? He countered, his voice gentle but his eyes challenging. You heard fragments, saw glimpses, and ran before asking for explanations. I was scared, I admitted, terrified of what those fragments meant. And now? He asked. Are you still terrified of me? I looked at him, this dangerous, complicated man cradling our son with such tenderness, and gave him the truth. I'm terrified of wanting to stay. Daniel's eyes darkened at my confession, a complex mix of emotions flashing across his usually guarded features. Wanting to stay is nothing to fear, Elena. Isn't it? I moved closer, taking a seat on the ottoman near the rocking chair. You represent everything I tried to escape, everything I wanted to protect Jamie from. And yet here you are, he observed quietly, his attention returning to Jamie, who was nearly finished with his bottle. Because you found us, I reminded him. Because I was desperate enough to text you. The memory of that moment, standing in front of my empty refrigerator, panic rising in my throat, felt distant now, as if it had happened to someone else, in another lifetime. Desperation brings clarity, Daniel said. It strips away pretense, reveals what truly matters. He shifted Jamie to his shoulder with practiced ease, gently patting our son's back. In your moment of need, you reached out to me, not someone else. That means something, Elena. I wanted to deny it, to claim I had exhausted all other options first, but we both knew it would be a lie. Daniel had been my first choice, not my last resort. Despite everything I knew about him, despite my fear, he had been the one I turned to when Jamie needed help. It means I'm a terrible mother, I whispered, voicing the fear that had haunted me since pressing send on that text. What kind of mother brings her child back to a world like yours? Daniel's expression hardened, the kind who wants her child to thrive, not merely survive. Jamie let out a small burp, and Daniel's features softened again, as he cradled our son back into the crook of his arm. You are an excellent mother, Elena. You've kept him safe, healthy, loved, but you've been doing it alone, running yourself into the ground in the process. Jamie's eyelids were growing heavy again, his bottle empty. Daniel stood carefully and returned him to the crib, tucking the elephant beside him with a gentleness that continued to surprise me. You don't have to do it alone anymore, he said, his voice low in the dimly lit nursery. Let me help you raise our son. Let me give you both the life you deserve. And what kind of life is that? I asked, rising from the ottoman. One where his father disappears for days on mysterious business? Where armed guards patrol the grounds? Where he learns that power comes from fear and violence? Daniel stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Is that really what you think he would learn from me? Isn't it what you learned from your father? The question slipped out before I could stop it, touching on the painful history Daniel rarely discussed. Something dark flickered in his eyes. My father taught me many things, most of them lessons in what not to become. He reached out slowly, his fingertips brushing a strand of hair from my face. I have no intention of repeating his mistakes with our son. The gentle touch sent a tremor through me, a visceral reminder of the connection we had once shared. I stepped back, needing distance to think clearly. Come, Daniel said, gesturing toward the door. Jamie's asleep. We should finish our conversation downstairs. I followed him back to the dining room, where Mrs. Alvarez had cleared the soup and served the main course. Perfectly cooked fillets, roasted vegetables, and garlic mashed potatoes that made my mouth water, despite my emotional turmoil. Daniel poured more wine for both of us before taking his seat. Eat, he encouraged. You need your strength. I took a bite, the flavors exploding on my tongue, reminding me how long it had been since I'd eaten anything that wasn't reheated or hastily prepared between shifts. For several minutes we ate in silence, the only sounds the gentle clink of silverware against fine china. Tell me about the past 10 months, Daniel said finally, setting down his knife and fork. Tell me about Jamie. The request caught me off guard. I had expected more negotiation, more pressure to accept his terms. Instead, he seemed genuinely interested in the son he had just discovered. He was born on December 12th, I began hesitantly. A little early, but healthy. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. You were alone? Daniel's expression darkened at the thought. I nodded. I had a midwife at a small birthing center. They were kind. His first word? A smile tugged at my lips despite myself. Mama, at about 7 months. He's still working on other words, but he babbles constantly. I took a sip of wine, the rich Cabernet warming me. He started crawling at 8 months, and he's trying to pull himself up now. The pediatrician says he's advanced for his age. Daniel listened with rapt attention as I continued, sharing the milestones and little moments that had filled our life. Jamie's first laugh, his favorite foods, the way he would bob his head to music. With each story, the tension between us eased slightly, replaced by the shared connection of two parents discussing their child. "I have pictures," I admitted, pulling out my battered phone. "Not many, but—" Daniel reached for the phone eagerly, his fingers brushing mine in the exchange. I watched as he scrolled through the sparse collection of photos I had managed to take. Jamie at 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. His expression softened with each image, the hard lines of his face relaxing into something more vulnerable, more human. "He's perfect," he murmured, lingering on a photo of Jamie laughing in a patch of sunlight on the apartment floor. "He has your smile, and your stubbornness," I countered with a small smile. "Once he decides he wants something, there's no dissuading him." Daniel looked up, a rare grin transforming his features. "A valuable trait," says the man who once refused to leave my apartment until I agreed to have dinner with him. The memory slipped out before I could censor it. Daniel sitting stubbornly on my old sofa, claiming he would wait all night if necessary after our chance meeting at the university library where I had worked. It worked, didn't it? His eyes held mine, warm with shared history, best 14-hour wait of my life. The comment caught me off guard, reminding me of the man I had fallen for. Determined, intense, but also capable of surprising humor and tenderness. Before Daniel the crime boss, there had been Daniel the man, and I had loved that man with an intensity that had frightened me even then. "Why me?" I asked suddenly, the question that had lingered since our first meeting finally finding voice. "Out of all the women you could have chosen, wealthy, connected, understanding of your world, why pursue the broke graduate student working night shifts at the university library?" Daniel set down my phone, considering the question. "Because you looked at me and saw a man, not a name or a bank account or a reputation." His gaze held mine steadily. "Because you challenged me, questioned me, made me justify my choices instead of simply accepting them. Because when you smiled, it felt like something I had been missing my entire life without knowing it." The raw honesty of his answer stole my breath. This was the Daniel few people ever saw. The man beneath the calculated exterior, capable of depths of feeling his enemies would never believe existed. "You disappeared once," he continued, his voice lower. "I won't survive it a second time." The admission hung between us, heavy with implication. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the table, the screen lighting up with a text message. Daniel glanced down reflexively, then froze, his expression transforming in an instant, from open vulnerability to cold fury. I reached for the phone, turning it to see the message that had triggered such a reaction. "Just checking you're okay. Didn't see you at work. Call me?" "Matt." "Who is Matt?" Daniel's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. All previous warmth evaporated. I sighed, suddenly exhausted. "A co-worker from the diner. Just a friend." "A friend," Daniel repeated, the word dripping with disbelief. "A friend who texts you at night to check if you're okay?" "Yes, a friend," I insisted, irritation flaring. "Matt is the cook at the diner. He's 63 and has grandchildren Jamie's age. He looks out for me, that's all." Daniel's expression didn't change, but something in his posture relaxed marginally. "And does this Matt know where you are tonight?" "No one knows where I am," I replied sharply. I didn't exactly leave a note saying, "Off to the mansion of the crime boss who fathered my child. Back later." The sarcasm earned me a narrow look. "Your safety is not a joke, Elena. If someone were looking for you—" "No one is looking for me," I interrupted. "Except you, apparently, for the past 2 years." Daniel leaned forward, his expression intense. "Do you have any idea how many people would use you and Jamie to get to me? How many enemies would consider you valuable leverage?" The thought sent a chill through me. I had considered the dangers of Daniel's world in abstract terms: illegal activities, violence, moral compromise, but not the specific threat to Jamie and myself as targets for his enemies. "No," I admitted quietly. "I hadn't thought of it that way. I have thought of little else," Daniel replied, his voice tight. "Every day since you left, I have imagined you out there, unprotected, vulnerable to anyone who might discover your connection to me." I stared at him, suddenly seeing his obsessive search in a new light, not just possessiveness or wounded pride, but genuine fear for my safety. For our safety. Is that why you had this house prepared? The security, the isolated location? I asked slowly. Daniel nodded. This property exists on paper under a shell corporation with no connections to me or my family. The staff are loyal and thoroughly vetted. The security systems are state-of-the-art, and the guards are former special forces. A gilded cage, I murmured. A sanctuary, he corrected firmly. One where you and Jamie can live in comfort and safety. With you, I added, meeting his gaze. With me, he confirmed. As a family. The word hung between us, loaded with meaning and expectations. Family had always been a complicated concept for both of us. Daniel with his brutal father and absent mother, me with parents who had died too young, leaving me to navigate the world alone. And what exactly would that entail? I asked carefully. This family arrangement. Daniel regarded me steadily. You and Jamie living here permanently. Shared custody and parental responsibilities. Financial support and security. He paused, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. And in time, perhaps more between us, if you're willing. More, I repeated. You mean a relationship? Yes. He didn't elaborate, didn't pressure, simply stated it as a possibility, a hope. I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. And your work? Your business? As I said, I've been transitioning to legitimate enterprises, Daniel replied. The process is nearly complete. Within 6 months, all my interests will be above board. And in the meantime? In the meantime, my work remains entirely separate from this house and our family, he stated firmly. I will never bring business here, never expose Jamie to any aspect of it. I wanted to believe him, part of me, the part that remembered how it felt to be loved and protected by him, already did. But the careful, cautious part that had kept Jamie and me alive for the past 10 months needed more. I need time, I said finally. This is all happening so fast. Yesterday I was struggling to buy milk for our son. Today you're offering us a life I never imagined possible. Daniel nodded slowly. How much time? A trial period, I suggested, the idea forming as I spoke. 1 month. Jamie and I will stay here, get to know you, see how this arrangement works in practice. At the end of the month I decide whether we stay permanently. Daniel's expression darkened. And if you decide to leave, then we negotiate a custody arrangement that allows you to be part of Jamie's life, while respecting my concerns. I held his gaze steadily. I won't keep him from you again, Daniel. I promise you that. But I need to know I can trust you before I commit to this life. For a long moment, Daniel was silent, his expression unreadable. I knew what I was asking was difficult for him. Daniel Castellano didn't do uncertainty, didn't leave decisions in others' hands. Control was as essential to him as breathing. 1 month, he finally agreed, his voice tight. With conditions. I raised an eyebrow. What conditions? You don't leave the property without security, he stated flatly. You allow me to provide for all financial needs. You make no contact with anyone from your previous life without discussing it with me first. His eyes held mine intently. And you are honest with me, completely honest about your concerns and needs during this time. The conditions were restrictive but not unreasonable, given the circumstances. I considered for a moment before nodding. I agree, with one addition of my own. Daniel waited expectantly. You are equally honest with me, I said firmly, about your business, about your plans for our future, about everything. No half-truths, no omissions, no protecting me from information you think I can't handle. A muscle ticked in Daniel's jaw, the only outward sign of his tension. Agreed, he said finally, though you may not like everything you learn. I'd rather know uncomfortable truths than comfortable lies, I replied. Daniel reached across the table, his hand extended toward mine, not demanding, but offering. After a moment's hesitation, I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong and achingly familiar. 1 month, he repeated softly. Beginning now. The contact between us sent a current of awareness through my body, a reminder of the chemistry that had always existed between us, regardless of the complications. I withdrew my hand slowly, needing to maintain some distance, some clarity. "I should check on Jamie," I said, rising from the table. Daniel stood as well, ever the gentleman despite the power and danger that clung to him like a second skin. "Of course. I'll show you to your room afterward. It connects to the nursery through an adjoining door." "My room," I repeated. "Not yours." Something heated flickered in his eyes, but he inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Your room, for now. I can be patient, Elena." The implication that his patience had limits hung unspoken between us. Daniel had never made a secret of his desire for me, even in the early days of our relationship. That desire, combined with his possessive nature, had been both thrilling and frightening then. Now, with Jamie between us and 2 years of separation to overcome, it was even more complicated. We checked on Jamie together, finding him sleeping peacefully, his tiny chest rising and falling in the soft glow of the nightlight. Daniel stood beside me at the crib, close enough that our shoulders nearly touched, united in this moment of parental wonder. "He trusts completely when he sleeps," Daniel observed quietly. "No worries, no fears." "That's our job," I replied. "To worry and fear for him, to protect him so he doesn't have to." Daniel glanced at me, something approving in his expression. "Yes, it is." We watched Jamie for another moment before Daniel led me through a door I hadn't noticed earlier, concealed within the nursery's wood paneling. It opened into a spacious bedroom decorated in soothing blues and creams, a king-size bed with what appeared to be silk sheets, a sitting area with comfortable chairs, a marble bathroom visible through another doorway. "Your things are in the closet," Daniel said, gesturing toward a walk-in closet that I suspected was larger than my entire apartment. Noting my confusion, he added, "I had Sophia purchase a new wardrobe for you this afternoon. If anything doesn't fit or isn't to your taste, she can exchange it." I should have been offended at the presumption, but instead found myself feeling oddly touched by the consideration. "Thank you," I said quietly. Daniel moved to the nightstand, pressing a button that illuminated a control panel. "The house security system can be accessed here. This button calls security directly." He pointed to another. "This one alerts me personally, day or night." He turned to face me, his expression serious. "Your safety, both of you, is my highest priority, Elena. Never hesitate to use these if you feel concerned about anything." The reminder of the dangers surrounding Daniel's world sent a shiver down my spine. "Do you expect trouble?" "I never expect it," he replied with grim certainty. "I prepare for it. There's a difference." I nodded, suddenly exhausted by the emotional whiplash of the day, from desperate single mother to whatever I was now. Co-parent with a crime boss? Reluctant inhabitant of a luxury fortress? Woman standing on the edge of falling back into a love that had once consumed her? "You're tired," Daniel observed, reading my fatigue with the same uncanny perception he had always possessed. "Rest. We can continue our discussion tomorrow." He moved toward the door, but paused with his hand on the knob. "I never stopped looking for you, Elena. Not for a single day." His eyes met mine, intense and sincere. "I never stopped hoping I would find you. And now that I have, now that I've found both of you, I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe, to keep you with me." The quiet certainty in his voice sent a tremor through me, part fear, part something else I wasn't ready to examine too closely. "Good night, Daniel," I said softly. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Good night, Elena. Welcome home." As the door closed behind him, I sank onto the edge of the bed, the events of the day crashing over me in waves. 24 hours ago, I had been staring at an empty refrigerator, desperate and alone. Now I sat in a mansion, my son sleeping peacefully in a nursery fit for royalty, with Daniel Castellano once again in our lives. 1 month to decide our future. 1 month to determine if Daniel could truly change, if his world could ever be safe for Jamie, if the feelings I had buried for 2 years were worth resurrecting. 1 month to decide if I was brave enough to stay. Morning light filtered through sheer curtains, casting soft patterns across the unfamiliar bed. For a disorienting moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came rushing back. The text, Daniel's appearance, this house, our agreement, 1 month to decide our future. I stretched, luxuriating in the feel of silk sheets against my skin. I hadn't slept this well in years, probably, since before Jamie was born, since before I ran. The baby monitor on the nightstand remained silent, suggesting Jamie was still asleep, unusual for him. He typically woke at dawn, ready for his first bottle. I slipped from the bed and padded to the adjoining door, easing it open to check on him. The nursery was empty. Panic seized me, my heart lurching painfully as I rushed to the crib. Jamie's stuffed elephant lay abandoned on the mattress, but my son was nowhere to be seen. I spun around, searching frantically for any sign of him, when a soft sound from downstairs caught my attention. Laughter. Jamie's distinct, delighted giggle. I hurried down the sweeping staircase, following the sound to a sun-drenched kitchen at the back of the house. And there they were, Daniel and Jamie, the most improbable breakfast companions imaginable. Daniel sat at the kitchen island, still in what appeared to be sleep clothes, expensive-looking lounge pants and a fitted t-shirt that revealed the muscular physique his suits usually concealed. Jamie was secured in a high chair beside him, happily smashing banana pieces between his tiny fingers. Neither had noticed me yet. I remained in the doorway, struck by the scene before me. Daniel Castellano, feared by enemies, respected by allies, a man whose name was whispered in certain circles, was making airplane noises as he guided a spoonful of what looked like pureed fruit toward our son's eagerly opening mouth. "That's my boy," he murmured when Jamie accepted the offering, his voice warm with pride. "Smart like your mother, strong like your father." The tenderness in his tone caught me off guard, causing a tightness in my chest I couldn't quite define. This wasn't the calculated performance of a man trying to convince me he could be a good father. This was genuine, unguarded affection when he thought no one was watching. Jamie spotted me first, his face lighting up with recognition. "Mama!" he exclaimed, one of his few clear words, banana-covered hands reaching toward me. Daniel turned, and for a brief moment, I glimpsed something unguarded in his expression. Contentment, perhaps even happiness, before his usual composure returned. But his eyes remained warm as they met mine. "Good morning," he said, setting down the small spoon. "We thought we'd let you sleep. You should have woken me," I replied, moving to Jamie and kissing his sticky forehead. "I didn't mean to oversleep. You needed the rest," Daniel stated simply. "And we've been having man-to-man time, haven't we, mijo? The Spanish endearment, my son." In Daniel's slight accent sent an unexpected wave of emotion through me. His heritage had always been important to him, though rarely displayed. That he was already sharing it with Jamie felt significant somehow. "He's been up for about an hour," Daniel continued, wiping Jamie's hands with a damp cloth. "Bottle, diaper change, and now breakfast. He seems to approve of Mrs. Alvarez's homemade baby food." I raised an eyebrow. "You changed his diaper?" A hint of amusement touched Daniel's eyes. "I told you I've been studying." He rose from his seat, moving to the coffee machine. "Breakfast? Mrs. Alvarez left fruit, pastries, and she can prepare eggs if you'd like." "Coffee is fine for now," I replied, still adjusting to this domestic version of Daniel. "Black, two sugars," he finished, already adding them to the cup. Some things I remember perfectly. He handed me the steaming mug, our fingers brushing in the exchange. The casual contact sent a jolt of awareness through me, a reminder of the chemistry that had always existed between us, dormant, but never quite extinguished. "Thank you," I murmured, moving to take the seat he had vacated beside Jamie. "For letting me sleep, and for taking care of him." Daniel leaned against the counter, watching as I took over feeding Jamie the remainder of his breakfast. "He's my son too, Elena. Taking care of him isn't a favor to you. It's my responsibility. My privilege." The simple statement held such sincerity that I found myself momentarily speechless. In the harsh light of morning, the reality of our situation was setting in. This wasn't a temporary arrangement. Whatever happened between Daniel and me, he would always be Jamie's father. The choice I had to make wasn't whether Daniel would be in our lives, but what form that involvement would take. "What are your plans for today?" I asked, changing the subject as I wiped a smear of banana from Jamie's chin. I thought we could stay here, get settled, Daniel replied. Show Jamie the grounds. There's a pool with a shallow children's area, and gardens I think he would enjoy exploring. The casual proposal, a family day at home, seemed surreal coming from a man I had once watched negotiate million-dollar deals and command a network of dangerous associates with a single look. You don't have work? I asked carefully. Daniel's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. I've cleared my schedule for the next few days. My associates understand that family matters take precedence. Family matters. The phrase hung between us, laden with meaning. To Daniel, we were already a family. Not a negotiation, not a trial period, but a certainty. Daniel, I began slowly. About our agreement. Elena, he interrupted gently. It's day one. Let's just be for a little while. Get to know each other again. Let Jamie adjust. He moved closer, his gaze steady on mine. We have time. The reasonable request disarmed me. I had expected pressure, manipulation, the calculated moves of a man accustomed to getting his way. Instead, Daniel was offering space, patience, qualities I hadn't associated with him in my fearful memories. All right, I conceded, turning my attention back to Jamie. One day at a time. The morning passed in surreal domesticity. After breakfast, Daniel showed us around the grounds, expansive gardens, the promised pool area, a small playground that had apparently been installed just yesterday. Jamie was delighted by it all, especially the swing that Daniel pushed him in gently, his tiny legs kicking with excitement. I watched them together, struck by how natural they seemed, how quickly Jamie had accepted Daniel into his world. Children were remarkably adaptive, I knew, but there seemed to be something more here, some instinctive recognition perhaps between father and son. He likes you, I observed, as Daniel lifted Jamie from the swing. Children are excellent judges of character, Daniel replied, settling our son on his hip with practiced ease. They sense sincerity. Is that what he's sensing from you? Sincerity? The question wasn't entirely a challenge, but genuine curiosity. Daniel's eyes met mine over Jamie's head. What do you think he's sensing, Elena? The direct question caught me off guard. I considered for a moment before answering honestly. Love. He senses that you love him. Something softened in Daniel's expression. Yes, he agreed quietly. I do. How? I asked, the question that had been nagging at me since yesterday finally finding voice. How can you love someone you just met? Daniel glanced down at Jamie, who was contentedly playing with the collar of his father's shirt. I loved him before I met him. From the moment I read your text, knew he existed. He looked back at me, his gaze steady. He's part of you and part of me. How could I not love him instantly? The simple declaration struck something deep within me. Daniel had always been capable of such certainty, such absolutism in his emotions. It was part of what had drawn me to him initially, his unwavering conviction in a world that had always seemed so uncertain to me. It's not always that simple, I murmured. It can be, Daniel countered. If we let it. The comment hung between us as we continued our tour, eventually returning to the house for Jamie's lunch and nap time. Daniel insisted on participating in every aspect of Jamie's routine, absorbing each detail with the same focused intensity he had once applied to business matters. After settling Jamie for his nap, we retreated to a comfortable sitting room overlooking the gardens. Mrs. Alvarez appeared with lunch, a light salad for me, something more substantial for Daniel, before discreetly withdrawing. Your staff is very efficient, I observed, picking at my salad. Do they live here? Daniel shook his head. Mrs. Alvarez comes daily. Security rotates shifts, with 2 men always on property. My driver, Marco, has quarters above the garage. He studied me over his water glass. Does their presence make you uncomfortable? A little, I admitted. I'm not used to having people around all the time, watching, serving. They're not watching you, Elena. They're protecting you. He set down his glass, leaning forward slightly. And they can be as invisible as you prefer. This house is designed to provide privacy while maintaining security. I nodded, taking in the subtle security features I had begun to notice. Cameras disguised as decorative elements, reinforced windows that looked ordinary, the carefully planned sightlines that would allow guards to monitor approaches without being obvious. It's all very thorough, I said finally. You've thought of everything. Not everything, Daniel replied, his voice quieter. I never anticipated Jamie. That was the one variable I couldn't plan for. The admission seemed to cost him something. Daniel had built his life, his empire, on careful planning and absolute control. The existence of a son he hadn't known about represented a massive disruption to that control. A disruption he was handling with surprising grace. Would you have looked for me differently if you had known? I asked, curious despite myself. If you had known I was pregnant when I left? Daniel considered the question with the gravity it deserved. I would have found you faster, he said finally. I would have been more aggressive in my methods. A chill ran through me at the implication. What methods did you use? He held my gaze steadily. Are you sure you want to know? Part of our agreement is complete honesty, but some truths are difficult to hear. I want to know, I insisted. No more secrets, remember? Daniel nodded once. I had teams in 6 cities following leads. Private investigators with specific instructions to be discreet, to observe but not approach if they found you. I had contacts in hospitals and clinics watching for your name or any aliases we thought you might use. He paused. I accessed databases I had no legal right to access, called in favors from people who owed me, paid substantial sums for information. You invaded my privacy, I stated, not entirely surprised but still disturbed by the scope of his search. Yes, he agreed without hesitation. I would have violated every privacy law in existence to find you, Elena. His expression hardened slightly. What I didn't do was harm anyone. I didn't threaten. I didn't destroy. I looked for you with every resource at my disposal, but I did it cleanly. By your standards, I pointed out. By any reasonable standard, he countered. I could have found you months ago if I had been willing to be less ethical in my methods. The claim gave me pause. Daniel Castellano, concerned about ethics? It contradicted everything I had believed about him when I ran. Why weren't you? I asked. Less ethical, I mean, if finding me was so important to you. Daniel's eyes never left mine, because I hoped when I found you, there would be a chance for reconciliation, for understanding. And that chance would be destroyed if I used methods that harmed you or others. He leaned back slightly. I wanted to find you, Elena, not terrify you into running further. The logic was so perfectly, essentially, Daniel, pragmatic, strategic, but with an underlying current of emotion that few people ever glimpsed. It reminded me why I had fallen for him in the first place, before I knew the full truth of his world. And now, I asked softly, now that you've found us? Now we decide what comes next, he replied simply. Together. The word hung between us, together, loaded with possibilities and complications. Before I could respond, my phone chimed from the coffee table. I reached for it automatically, checking the screen. Need money for rent ASAP. Landlord threatening eviction. Amy, my neighbor from the apartment, a single mother like myself, with twins barely older than Jamie. We had helped each other occasionally, watching each other's children during overlapping shifts, sharing resources when one of us came up short. A friend? Daniel asked, his tone carefully neutral, but his eyes sharp with interest. My neighbor, I explained, already typing a response. She's in trouble with the landlord, the same landlord who was threatening you with eviction? Daniel's voice hardened. The one I paid through the end of your lease yesterday? I looked up, surprised. You really did that? I said I did. A hint of offense colored his tone. I don't lie to you, Elena. No, you just omit crucial information, I countered, unable to help myself. Like the fact that you're the head of a crime family. Daniel's expression shuddered slightly. You knew who I was when we met. Perhaps not the specifics, but you knew I wasn't an ordinary businessman. He was right. And we both knew it. I had sensed the danger surrounding Daniel from our first meeting, had been drawn to it, if I was completely honest with myself. The expensive suits, the deferential treatment he received everywhere we went, the careful way people spoke around him. I had known he was powerful in ways that exceeded legitimate business. I had simply chosen not to look too closely. "You're right," I admitted quietly. I knew something wasn't conventional. I just didn't know how deep it went. Daniel nodded once, accepting my concession without pressing the advantage. "What does your neighbor need, exactly?" I glanced back at Amy's text. "Rent money. Probably utilities, too," knowing her situation. Without hesitation, Daniel pulled out his phone, tapped something into it, and set it down. "It's taken care of." I stared at him. "What do you mean, taken care of?" "I mean the landlord will receive payment for her rent and utilities through the end of her lease, same as yours," he replied simply. "She'll receive notification later today." "Just like that?" I asked, slightly stunned by the casual display of financial power. "You don't even know how much it is." "It doesn't matter how much it is," Daniel said with a slight shrug. "Your friend needed help. I provided it." The ease with which he solved a problem that would have been insurmountable for me just days ago was both impressive and slightly terrifying. This was the double-edged sword of Daniel's world, the power to protect, to provide, but also the underlying reminder of how that power had been accumulated. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "Amy has been a good friend to me and Jamie." Daniel nodded, his expression softening slightly. "Then she deserves our help." He paused, watching me closely. "That's what I want you to understand, Elena. The resources at my disposal can be used for good. To protect, to support, to build. It's a matter of choice and intention." "And your intentions?" I asked quietly. "For your business? For the future?" "Are exactly as I told you," he replied steadily. "Legitimacy, security, family." His eyes held mine with unwavering intensity. I meant what I said about transitioning to legitimate enterprises. "The process began before you left, accelerated after you disappeared." "Why?" I pressed, needing to understand. "You've spent your entire adult life building your organization. Why change course now?" Daniel was silent for a long moment, considering his response. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight of conviction I hadn't anticipated. "Because I want more than power and wealth, Elena. I want a legacy that doesn't require my son to look over his shoulder for the rest of his life. I want him to be proud of his name, not burdened by it." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "And I want a life with you that isn't shadowed by fear. Yours or mine." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't the calculated charm he deployed in negotiations, or the cold certainty he used to command respect. This was Daniel stripped of pretense, offering a truth I hadn't expected. "You're doing this for us," I said softly. "Not quite a question. For all of us." He corrected gently. "For the family we could be." The baby monitor crackled with Jamie's familiar wake-up sounds before I could respond. Daniel rose immediately. "I'll get him," he said, already moving toward the stairs. "Take some time. Think about what I've said." As he disappeared up the staircase, I remained seated, my thoughts in turmoil. The Daniel who had reappeared in my life was both familiar and strange. The same commanding presence, the same intensity, but tempered by something I could only describe as purpose. Not the cold ambition that had driven him before, but something warmer, more human. Could I trust it? Could I trust him? The questions circled without clear answers. The days passed in a similar pattern of domestic discovery. Daniel rearranged his schedule to spend most of his time at the house, leaving only for brief periods when business demanded his physical presence. Each day revealed new aspects of him as a father, patient, attentive, surprisingly playful with Jamie, who had taken to him with a trust that both reassured and terrified me. A week into our arrangement, I found Daniel in his home office late one evening after Jamie had gone to bed. He was studying documents on his computer, his expression focused in the way I remembered from our earlier life together. "Working late?" I asked from the doorway, unsure if I was interrupting. Daniel looked up, his expression immediately softening. "Just finalizing some transfers. Come in." I entered the tastefully appointed office, taking a seat in one of the leather chairs opposite his desk. For a week, we had maintained a careful distance, friendly but not intimate. cooperative but not fully trusting. Yet something was shifting between us, the invisible walls slowly crumbling with each shared moment over Jamie's care, each conversation that revealed more of the changes in both our lives. "Transfers?" I asked, curious despite myself. Daniel studied me for a moment before turning his computer screen so I could see it. The final phase of legitimate asset restructuring. Moving investments from shell companies into properly registered corporations with transparent ownership. The screen showed complex financial data that meant little to me, but the amounts involved were staggering, tens of millions of dollars flowing through various entities. "This is what you meant by going legitimate," I said, understanding dawning. "You're not just changing operations. You're completely restructuring your finances." Daniel nodded. "The transition began 2 years ago. It accelerates now." He held my gaze steadily. "By the time our 1-month agreement concludes, every aspect of my business interests will be fully legal, fully transparent." The timing wasn't coincidental, and we both knew it. Daniel was ensuring that by the time I had to make my decision about our future, there would be no lingering questions about the legality of his empire. "And your associates?" I asked carefully. "The people who have worked for you for years. What happens to them in this transition?" "Those willing to adapt have been retained in new capacities," Daniel replied. "Those unwilling or unsuitable have been compensated generously for their past service and released from any obligations." "Just like that?" I pressed, skeptical. "No one objects to this dramatic change of direction?" A hint of the old, dangerous Daniel flickered in his eyes. "My decisions are not subject to debate, Elena. Never have been." The reminder of his authority, of the power he still wielded, sent a familiar shiver down my spine. Fear mingled with something else, something I wasn't ready to examine too closely. "And what about the past?" I asked quietly. "The things you've done, the people you've hurt. Does going legitimate erase all that?" Daniel leaned back slightly, regarding me with unexpected candor. "Nothing erases the past. I don't expect absolution, Elena. Only the chance to build a different future." His expression grew more intent. "A future with you and Jamie." The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. This was the core of Daniel Castellano. Beneath the power and the danger and the calculation, a man capable of profound feeling, of transformation driven by love. "I'm trying to trust you," I admitted, the confession slipping out before I could stop it. "I'm trying to believe this change is real." "I know," he said softly, "and I'm trying to be worthy of that trust." He rose from his desk, moving around to lean against its edge, closer to where I sat. "It's been a week, Elena. What are you thinking? How are you feeling about all of this?" The direct question deserved a direct answer. "Confused," I admitted. "Torn between what I remember, what I feared, and what I'm seeing now." I met his gaze steadily. "Jamie loves you already. That much is clear." "And you?" Daniel asked, his voice dropping lower. "What are you feeling beyond confusion?" My pulse quickened at his proximity, at the intensity in his dark eyes. "I don't know," I whispered. "I'm not sure I can trust my feelings where you're concerned. I never could." Daniel reached out slowly, his fingertips brushing my cheek, in a touch so gentle it nearly undid me. "Your feelings were never the problem, Elena. It was the fear that came with them." I closed my eyes briefly at his touch, memories washing over me. The first time he had touched me this way, the last night before I discovered the truth and ran, the countless moments between filled with passion and tenderness that contradicted everything I later came to believe about him. "I was right to be afraid," I murmured, opening my eyes to find him watching me with naked longing. "Yes," he agreed softly. "You were. My world was dangerous then, more than I allowed myself to admit." His hand dropped away, leaving my skin tingling in its absence. "But I'm offering you a different world now. A safer one. For how long?" I challenged gently. "How long before the old ways call you back? Before the power you're surrendering becomes too tempting again?" Daniel's expression grew solemn. "Power was never the goal, Elena. Security was. Control." His gaze held mine intently. "I grew up with nothing. No protection, no certainty. at the mercy of a father who ruled through fear and violence. Everything I built was to ensure I would never be vulnerable again. The rare glimpse into his past, into the motivations that had shaped him, created a crack in the wall I had built around my heart. I had always known pieces of Daniel's history: the abusive father, the mother who had died too young, the poverty and danger of his childhood. But I had never fully understood how those experiences had forged him. And now? I asked softly. Now I understand there are different kinds of vulnerability, he replied, his voice lower. The kind that comes from opening yourself to love, to family, to a future you can't control entirely. He moved closer, his knees nearly touching mine. That's the vulnerability I'm choosing now, Elena. For Jamie, for you. If you'll let me. The sincerity in his voice, in his eyes, was unmistakable. This wasn't the calculated charm of a man accustomed to getting his way, but the raw honesty of someone who had confronted his own nature and chosen a different path. I want to believe you, I whispered, the confession costing me more than I had expected. I want to believe in this version of you, of us. Daniel knelt before me, taking my hands in his, not commanding, not possessing, but offering. Then believe it, he said simply. Give us the chance to become what we were always meant to be. I looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of deception, any shadow of the man I had feared. Instead, I found only Daniel. Complicated, intense, dangerous in some ways, but also capable of profound love, of sacrifice, of change. I need more time, I said finally. We still have 3 weeks left in our agreement. Daniel nodded, accepting my hesitation without protest. 3 weeks, he agreed, rising to his feet, but keeping my hands in his. But know this, Elena. I have already made my choice. I chose you and Jamie the moment I received your text. Every decision since then has been in service to that choice. The simple declaration hung in the air between us, powerful in its certainty. Daniel had always possessed this quality, this absolute conviction that, once decided, admitted no doubt or wavering. 3 weeks passed more quickly than I could have imagined, filled with small moments that gradually rebuilt the trust between us. Daniel included me in every aspect of his transition to legitimacy, showing me documents, introducing me to his legal team, proving through actions rather than words that the change was real and irrevocable. Jamie flourished under the attention of both parents, developing new skills almost daily, his vocabulary expanding to include dada alongside mama, a development that had brought actual tears to Daniel's eyes the first time he heard it. And slowly, inevitably, the walls around my heart crumbled. The Daniel I had feared became increasingly difficult to reconcile with the man who read bedtime stories with dramatic voices, who sat through business calls with Jamie napping on his chest, who looked at me each day with unwavering devotion and infinite patience. On the final day of our 1-month agreement, I found Daniel in the garden, watching Jamie crawl across a blanket spread on the manicured lawn. The sight of them together, dark heads bent in concentration over a colorful toy, created a tightness in my chest that was both painful and exquisite. Daniel looked up as I approached, his expression questioning. We both knew what day it was, what decision awaited us. Join us? He asked simply, patting the blanket beside him. I settled onto the soft fabric, smiling as Jamie immediately crawled into my lap, babbling excitedly about his toy. He's trying to say elephant, Daniel observed with a fond smile. He's got the first syllable down. L, Jamie confirmed, waving the stuffed animal for emphasis before crawling back toward his other toys. We watched him in comfortable silence for a moment, the peace of the afternoon wrapping around us like a gentle embrace. It's been a month, Daniel said finally, his voice quiet but steady. Have you made your decision, Elena? I turned to face him fully, taking in the man who had once been my greatest fear and was now, against all odds, my greatest hope. Yes, I said simply. I have. Daniel's expression remained carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight tightening of his jaw as he prepared himself for whatever answer I might give. This past month has shown me a side of you I always suspected existed but never fully believed in. I began softly. You've been honest, patient, devoted to Jamie. And to me. Always to you, Daniel interjected quietly. I nodded, acknowledging the truth of his words. The world you're building now, the legitimate business, this safe home, the future you envision, it's everything I could want for Jamie. For us. Hope flickered in Daniel's eyes, but he remained silent, waiting for me to finish. I've realized something important, I continued, reaching out to take his hand. The day I texted you about the milk, I wasn't just reaching out because I was desperate. I was reaching out because deep down, some part of me never stopped hoping you could be the man I'm seeing now. Daniel's fingers tightened around mine, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my skin. And what do you see now, Elena? I see a man who loves his son unconditionally, I answered honestly. A man who has moved mountains to create a safe future for his family. A man who has waited, without pressure or manipulation, for me to make my own choice. I met his gaze steadily. I see the man I fell in love with, but stronger, better, more complete. Daniel's eyes darkened with emotion. And your decision? I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. The weight of fear and uncertainty finally lifting from my shoulders. My decision is to stay, to build this life with you, to raise Jamie together, to become the family you've believed in all along. The control that defined Daniel in all things slipped momentarily, raw emotion transforming his features as he processed my words. In one fluid movement, he pulled me into his arms, cradling me against his chest, as if I were something infinitely precious, infinitely fragile. Elena. He whispered against my hair, my name a prayer on his lips. Thank you for this second chance. I swear to you, I will never give you reason to run again. I leaned back slightly, meeting his gaze. No more secrets, no more fear, just us, building something real together. Just us, Daniel agreed, his hand coming up to cut my cheek. You, me, and Jamie, family. The word no longer frightened me. Instead, it felt like coming home. Not to a place, but to a person, to the connection we had always shared, now strengthened by time and truth, and the small miracle playing contentedly at our feet. Daniel leaned forward slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted, but I didn't want to. Instead, I closed the distance between us, pressing my lips to his in a kiss that felt like sealing a promise. His arms tightened around me, familiar and new all at once. The passion that had always existed between us rekindled instantly, tempered now by deeper understanding, by the knowledge of what we had almost lost, and what we had found again. When we finally separated, both slightly breathless, Jamie crawled between us, demanding attention with imperious babbles. Daniel laughed, a rare, genuine sound that transformed his usually serious features, and lifted our son into his arms. What do you think, mijo? He asked, settling Jamie on his knee. Are you happy with Mama's decision? Jamie reached out, placing one tiny hand on Daniel's cheek and the other on mine, as if physically connecting us. Mama, he declared confidently. Then, with equal certainty, Dada. That's right, I whispered, blinking back unexpected tears. Mama and Dada are both here now. Always. Daniel's eyes met mine over Jamie's head, a world of meaning in that single glance. Gratitude, joy, and a love so profound it transcended the complications of our past. Always, he echoed softly, the word both a promise and a certainty. In that moment, with the afternoon sun warm on our faces and our son secure between us, I knew with absolute clarity that I had made the right choice. The text I had sent in desperate need had led us here, to this second chance, this new beginning. Daniel Castellano had once been the man I fled from in fear. Now he was the man I chose to build a future with, in strength and in love. The journey had been unexpected, complicated, even dangerous at times, but as Daniel drew me closer, creating a circle of warmth with our small family, I realized that sometimes the most unexpected paths lead exactly where we're meant to be. Sometimes, a desperate text about milk can change everything.